Is the UK in a rental crisis right now? Well, I believe yes, there is a UK rental crisis. We've seen rents jump up dramatically over the last couple of years. There is a shortage of accommodation. People often have to bid even to get into accommodation, somewhere to live. This is a real problem, and unfortunately, it's the tenants who are losing out here. Now, my name's Simon Zutshi. I've been a landlord and an investor since 1995, and I can tell you very often that as a landlord, we get criticism by tenants. You know, the landlords are stopping people get on the housing ladder, and to a certain extent there's some truth there, but also I think there are a lot of tenants who are very vocal, who complain about landlords, but don't realise that actually if there weren't private landlords providing accommodation, we'd be even in an even worse rental crisis. Now, how do I know that? What makes me say that? Well, let's look at what's happened recently up in Scotland. The government in Scotland decided they wanted to protect tenants, and in theory, that's a great idea. So what they did, they said if there's an existing tenancy, they brought a rent cap into place. So what actually happened? Well, anyone who didn't have a tenancy in place, landlords, they thought, you know, actually we should going to increase the rents as much as we can now, so when the new tenants come in case rent caps come in, we've already increased the rents. So existing empty properties suddenly become very much more expensive. Also, a whole load of landlords said, hang on a minute, this doesn't sound good. This is a reason for us to get out of the property market. And so lots of landlords sold their properties. That meant there was even less rental stock. And what happened in Scotland, we saw rents go up dramatically. One of my mastermind students, who's a letting agent up there, she was saying that they had a property where the tenant passed on. They were on a very low rent at £700. This was very recently. And so when the the landlord relet their property, they went from £700 up to £1,400. The rent doubled, and they very quickly filled it because there was such a shortage of accommodation. Now, the Labour government have talked about maybe bringing in some rent controls. And my concern is that actually maybe it's the tenants that are going to suffer here. Because again, this is going to be one more thing that's going to cause many existing landlords to want to sell their properties. So in other words, there'll be less property available. People who don't have tenancies in place might jack up the rent now, worried about they're not going to be able to do it in the future. So I think it's going to cause this escalating problem. Now, the Labour Party has said they want to stop things like people bidding for properties where sometimes a property is listed at a certain price and then the letting agent says, well, put your best offer in. Now, this is something that sometimes happens in the property market when you're buying a property. If there's a lot of demand, the estate agent will say, well, you know, the highest bid wins. But now, and I'm not really seeing this apart from the last couple of years, where tenants are looking for properties, they were queuing up to find properties and they're saying, we want the very best tenant to come in. Here's the other thing. The Labour government have talked about abolishing the no-fault eviction, Section 21. And I think it's not such a bad thing getting rid of that anyway. But what it means is, if landlords are going to be less able to get rid of bad tenants, I think they're going to be far more fussy on who they put into their property as a tenant. So I think some poorer, disadvantaged tenants are going to have even more difficulty finding accommodation. So again, I think if rent controls come in, some things that come in that are supposed to be protecting tenants, actually the victim might be the tenants. Now let's talk about this idea about, you know, lots of landlords are having rental properties. That means people can't get their foot on the ladder. As I said earlier, I think there's an element of truth in this, but actually let's look at what type of properties landlords have. Now, a lot of landlords have apartments, 1- and 2-bed apartments that they rent out. A lot of landlords have bigger properties, or they've got lots of rooms that are HMOs, houses of multiple occupation. Well, I would suggest that most people buying a property, unless maybe they're in London where maybe they have to buy an apartment, most people buying probably don't really want to buy apartments because there are service charges and things like that. Most people want to buy a small 1- or 2-bedroom house with a bit of a garden. If they can, that's how they want to get started. That's typically not the kind of house or property that most landlords rent out. So although, yes, obviously some landlords do buy those and rent them out, that means people can't actually buy those properties. Many rental properties that landlords rent out are not the type of property that first-time buyers want to buy anyway. I think some tenants have to be very careful what you wish for. If people say, oh, let's put all this legislation in place so there are no private landlords anymore, well, if that happens, there will be less rental accommodation available, and actually rents are going to cost more for everybody. So you kind of got to be a bit careful what you ask for. Rather than complain and beat up landlords, if you can't beat them, why don't you join them? Because if you're watching this video and you're renting at the moment, there are ways for you to become a property owner. There are lots of strategies you can learn to not only become a home owner yourself, but you can also start providing rental accommodation. So rather than complain about it, why not do something about it, educate yourself, and I've got lots of free content here. There's lots of free content on my Property Magic podcast, so you too can learn how to become a landlord. And there are some bad landlords who provide ill-equipped slum accommodation, and absolutely there should be regulation to stop those bad landlords. But if you become a landlord, you can decide exactly what type of landlord you want to become. And I would like to teach you to become a good, ethical landlord, providing good quality accommodation to your tenants for a fair price. Then I think you should be making lots of money because you are doing a service to our community. So that's what I believe. You might completely disagree, you might agree with me. I'd love to hear your comments. If you agree or disagree, come and comment below. Also, please like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and also hit the bell icon to make sure you're notified anytime these videos come out. So I'd love to hear, what do you think? Are we in a UK rental crisis right now, and what should be done about it? Come and comment below. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Invest with knowledge, invest with skill.